As somebody who always hated my own hair, I don't really care what people do with their hair. You know,
Good move.
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 505 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, I'm the local organizer.
I'm Sam, I'm the artiste. Look, organizer.
I want to see if you can
He's
figure out what that
co-organizing the
was.
lorks.
Mm.
This is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's January 31th, 2025. I forgot what the slogan was for a
It feels like
there.
as we're going, your tongue just sort of left your mouth. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like
I didn't need it anymore.
Nope.
You know,
Who needs
you got lips. You can
You
enunciate all you need. Before we go any further, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show, and we would also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for letting us grab your money to keep this podcast going. So today we're just going to talk about Crashlands 2 all the time, all day, every day.
Yep.
Today. So where are we at? We are bearing down on the launch, which is April 10th, which is just under 10 weeks from the time that we were recording this episode.
Spicy.
We're getting prepared for a closed beta test. We are trying to get everything done so that we can get it sent off for translation. We are cinching up game systems. Stuff is happening. So let's talk about some of the milestones that we hit this week first. So first off, let's talk about the art.
Yeah. So
Where are we at?
as we discussed in I think the last two episodes, I've been doing what we refer to internally as Artamegeddon, which also
I like calling it Artamegeddon.
yeah, which is also the name of the actual Clip Studio files. It's literally Artamegeddon, Artamegeddon 2, which are these two just giant grids of the remaining things that we had in the game. So that's weapons, trinkets, just all that stuff that hadn't yet been done because it was able to be existing as placeholders, which let me, do the other stuff I got to do. And then so now it's finally time to wrap all that up. So that is all wrapped up. All of the
Game
items
feels
in-
different now.
Yeah.
Feels different.
You can see things after you make them, which is great.
What?
Yeah, I was
Yeah, crazy.
playing a bit last night, and I had a bunch of items that from my playthrough were just the same item over and over again because the art wasn't in yet. And so then all of a sudden I was like, oh, all my stuff looks different and cool now, just like magically appeared. I also will say this new set of art assets, this new set of items, includes one of the most horrifying things I've ever perceived with my human eyeballs. So
Yep.
that's gonna be a fun surprise for everybody.
It is called the Constant Terrifier. So I think all you're saying is that I did a good job.
It worked.
And-
It was effective. And it did make me think. We always talk about making a horror game someday, and I was like, okay, I believe it. We could do it.
It's an equipable item that makes you go fast because you want to get away from it.
Yep.
But
it's
you're
stuck
wearing
to
it. So it's kind of like it's like the opposite of a carrot on a stick, It's like you got this thing stuck to you that you hate and you want to get away from it. So everything you do is faster.
And it was very fun because this is also, so we're in this interesting spot with on the art side where, of course, I'm still doing the stuff full time, but then with Anne, who's been the great artist who's been helping make just tons of stuff since last year. She's moved into just a couple of days a week. So I've had to figure out kind of exactly how to deploy her, right, a little more specifically. So previously I would be like, hey, make
like a SWAT team of art.
Yeah, so I'd be like, hey, here's the list of items, just like go make them, top to bottom, put them in, whatever. But with this, I was like, okay, I don't know exactly how the timing's going to work out. So I ended up handing her just like basically 30 of these, including that Constant Terrifier thing, to paint, right? So she actually, which we'd never done before, where it was like giving someone else the design that's already done, like the drawing was already done, the form's already there, but no rendering on top of that. And she knocked it out of the park. So
She probably had a blast because it's like a coloring book at that point.
it is a coloring book. Yeah, 100%. So that was a lot of work. But between the two of us, so I wrapped it up on Tuesday, and I was in like a fugue state, basically just cranking these things out. I can't. It is something like I knocked out like so many layers in one day. I did 31 of them in one day, and I think the layer rate was like a layer per minute, basically for the entire workday, like on average or something. Maybe a little, like I think a little less, but in any event, too fucking much and too fast.
Yeah,
and so it was just
just
like just going as fast as I could.
Wild piece of production. I think
Yeah.
players are going to experience the game over a very long period of time because it's a long game, right? So I don't think you'll be able to notice. But I've been able to notice as I just see like batches of art all to go. Sam is becoming like increasingly a little more unhinged, right?
100%.
As the art goes on. And like the art assets in original Crashlands too, original Crashlands also, and then Crashlands too, they're already kind of gross anyway, because it's all about like crafting stuff from the parts of biological things.
It's around.
Yeah, so there's like a little bit of a vague grossness to them, but it's all like kind of cutesy. It's cutesy at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of a little abstract. And I feel like Crashlands 2 starts that way also, where it's like it's still more cute than it is gross. As it goes on, it starts to like lean a little more. It never gets like gross, except for a few particular items, but it starts to like lean more onto the gross side of the
I assume you're talking about in the mid husk in particular.
Mid husk.
Mid husk is just really gross shit going on.
It's just kind of gross. And thematically, it also makes sense too, because I'm not going to get into the reason why, but thematically it makes sense anyway. But I still feel like it just feels like in the same way that as you read tooltip descriptions, you can tell like how long Seth has been at it, right? Because they also get just more and more unhinged in any given session. So you see, it's kind of like this, jigsaw pattern of like unhinged, and then you can see, okay, Seth went to sleep, started over, it goes again, and the art has that same kind of a vibe. That's not as intensely, I don't think, but has a fun pattern to get to witness. And I think it's that reminder. This is why I think this kind of stuff is so fun, because people make it. And
I think you can see it, which is nice,
Yeah, you can like see that. A person, you can like get a sense of like a person's state as they're working on stuff.
They had more fun with this one,
Yeah, you can tell they were having fun. Yeah, I think it's
look, and it creates a natural variability in the game experience as well. Where like sometimes you're playing through and like some of the quests are a little bit more subdued or have like a certain emotional tenor to them, and then the next storyline you come across just has just the most unhinged character who's just off their rocker, and then that storyline is just goofy as hell, right? And it's like, yeah, it kind of depends on what kind of mental state you're in as you're putting the stories together.
It's a good time. So it's really fun to have all those wrapped up, and weird because again, it's been closing on 4.5 years of dev.
It's a big milestone.
So that's crazy. And also just the rate of them is just crazy, because it's like, there's so much of the items that just have been existing in the game since basically the beginning of it were made while trying to figure everything out, right? So it's like most of them, right? That existed prior to this, like the first weapon, whatever, but it's just like, how do you make a weapon in this game context? What angle does it need to be at to look good when Flux is running around like a maniac, like all this stuff. And now it's like, it's all those things are just dialed in. And so you just have this giant pile that comes flooding in, which is kind of cool. And then now that that's wrapped, and we get to move on to, on the art side, basically the finale kind of sequence, which I'm obviously not gonna say anything about, but there is one, and it's been really fun trying to put that together. It is like in-world. It's not like a cutscene, but it's essentially like, I guess it's like an in-world cutscene equivalent, if that makes sense. Things are happening, in the game world, not like a video.
Yeah, it's the thing where we would do the trailer. It would be like actual gameplay,
Yeah,
at the bottom.
Exactly. So it's been a lot of fun trying to put that together, and again, kind of revisiting enough of that, almost like that animatic work I did with the Homecoming short from the beginning of dev. And I don't know, it's a nice little echo here at the end of things. And it's still got some bosses to do, basically, but
to animate. Yeah, the bosses are in, but they just they just kind of float around, and it's interesting trying to, as we were working on a lot of these boss fights and refining them. Yeah, like it's interesting trying to balance them mechanically when they don't have animations, because like telegraphing attacks is such a huge part of the combat, right?
In particular,
yeah. So the boss will like run somewhere, and you're like, oh, what's gonna happen? And suddenly it's just like a spray of bullets. Like, oh right, yep, that's the thing I got to run away from. So the art's all in there. I mean, it's just cruising. And then otherwise this week we were working on achievements.
Yeah.
And by working on, I mean they're done. Like we started and finished them. This is one of those weird. In a way, it reminds me of like way back in the day when we first started making games. Like one of the first things we would always do is make a main menu that has like a play button on it.
Yep.
So even if there was nothing else on the main menu, and it's because like booting up a game directly into gameplay, it just doesn't feel like a real game. It feels like a prototype.
It's one of the things we found from doing so many game jams is like
you gotta have a main menu.
Yeah, take that time because it makes it feel, even if you end up having to cut a feature to put a main menu in for like
you gotta have
it. It makes it feel like you actually made a thing as opposed to
because like booting up the game to a title screen, even if it's literally just like a regular font, just the name of the game,
and like a screenshot of it in the back.
And like with some music, right? Like it somehow just says like this is a real game, right? And so achievements are kind of like that, but on the back end, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, even though this is kind of a weird personal thing for me, like I'm not really much of an achievement person. I think a lot of times achievements are just kind of like there's a long time where I had like a weird oppositional opinion to them because a lot of times achievements would just be like, do this thing that you were already gonna do.
Yeah.
And so it bothered me that they were called achievements because it doesn't really feel like you achieved something.
You had a sort of a semantic quibble with.
You played the game.
Yeah.
If they called them like milestones or something, and that was what we called them, you'd be like, okay, yeah, that's the thing that you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of them are just milestones, but some of them are actually achievements.
Yeah.
They are hard to do.
And so we've talked, I think we've talked on the podcast, probably 150 episodes from ago about like achievement design and some of the wrinkles with it when it comes to players, which is depending on player expectations for achievements. Like some players think that when you play through a game, if you say I 100% a game, that I should essentially get all the achievements for doing that, which essentially, again, treats the achievements like milestones. But some players want there to actually be hard achievements. But then if you mix those in, because some people are very intense about like completing all achievements for every game they get, which is cool. I think it's a great way to play games, if that's your style. If you have ones that are really hard, then people get really mad about it. And so it's this weird, it's like this really weird, it's almost like game design in and of itself, right? Where it's like, who are these for? And it turns out they're for a lot of different people and there are a lot of different expectations. And so you kind of have to figure out.
It varies by platform a lot. Cause I know so back in the Levelhead days when we were designing those achievements, our biggest concern with like kind of basically every aspect of the design of Levelhead was how does this choice impact the likelihood that people will basically fuck up the market of games by putting garbage into it because they're trying to satisfy some other goal,
so if you said like in Levelhead's case, publish 100 levels, someone's like, all right, and they just like make the basic dumbest level possible.
And we ended up still with a few achievements that like kind of fall into that category, but they were the ones we were like, well, like we don't think the incentive is so strong, but or
if you're like, for example, achievement of like die 1,000 times in player made levels, right? That means people would just make levels
and then just die.
that just like summons you right above a spike, and if you just move to the right an inch, then you would live. But so that way they can still publish it, right? Yep. But then if you just sit there and do nothing, then you just keep spawning and dying over and over again, right?
And so we didn't want. And now if you're just like playing to actually have fun, and then you stumble across that level, like that sucks, right? So
that sucks.
So, but despite having like being pretty careful about how we design those things, we still ran into platform differences where Steam players never was a problem. Ever.
Yep.
Right. Xbox players.
Xbox achievements.
Every problem we've had with players fucking up the ecosystem to get an achievement was an Xbox player. Yep. Every single time. And that's also not most of our players. Most of our players are Steam players, right? Mm-hmm. So they're enormously disproportionately represented in the fuckery category. It's because the way that people treat achievements on Xbox is extremely different. And it's that whole same that mindset you're describing of like, I have to be able to get all of it. Otherwise, and people actually buy games just to be able to get all the achievements on them because they come with a point system, and then the points go to their global point score and all this kind of stuff, right?
Which really sucks as a developer because now you've got people who hate your game and never wanted to play it to begin with. Yep. They buy it just so they can do a bunch of stuff that they really don't want to do, and they're fucking mad at you the whole time for making them do it. Right? It's like, what are we doing?
I think the Game Pass exacerbated this a bunch, of course, because like it's not you
didn't have to buy it then.
You just
get it.
Yeah, it's like you basically have also then this platform-based cultural expectations thing,
which is a very small subset of Xbox players who behave like this.
Oh, 100%.
But they're so belligerent about it.
Yeah,
those people.
It is true that once Levelhead left Game Pass, this became an almost non-issue. We still had it a few times. Again, always with Xbox users, but yeah, it became mostly not an issue at that
Although nowadays nobody even knows what an Xbox is. So that's a problem that's kind of sorting itself out.
This podcast is an Xbox. That's what it is.
Yeah. Did you see that that thing that Microsoft put out. They have like this ad campaign of like, this is an Xbox. And then it was like a computer.
It's basically any device.
This is an Xbox in your pocket. And it's a phone. And then everybody's like, what?
Everyone's like, how do I buy an Xbox? Dead.
If everything is an Xbox, nothing is an Xbox. What are we doing?
But it's also a funny ad campaign because you can't play almost any game on
what are they advertising for?
except for Xbox, the actual piece of hardware. And maybe a PC to some extent, but
I want to see them put out a thing that's like, and they show like a book. And they're like, this is an Xbox for learning. Because, yeah.
Yes, we got all the achievements designed, which of course is like, again, trying to thread this needle, right? Of like, how do you think about these in a way to satisfy everybody? And then also the fact that like, these aren't free on the dev side for us to put together, right? You have to then do some dev work to be able to even know that the achievement happened, right? Which is kind of a funny one, but like, they're not just, you can't just ask the game, like, if I say something like, hey, I don't know, did the player, kill something using X ability? It's not necessarily, depending on the context of the game, like, available for you just to grab. So you have to go in and like add hooks and all this other stuff just to be able to detect the idea that you have put up in the design sense. And then all the art and everything else that goes into it too. So basically we have, at this point, all of them are designed, they're all integrated on the engineering side. So they all work. We still have to make all the like 40 icons or something like that for them. And so that's also like, that's a weird.
Well, and the fun thing about achievements is like, first you have the question of what's stuff that would kind of push players a little bit outside of what they would normally do, but not in a way that's just kind of annoying, right? So because we have one which I think we kind of, so we also have to balance them, right? But like one of them we kind of undershot a little bit, I think, which is we're just like, can we have achievement for just like doing a certain amount of damage in one hit?
Mm-hmm.
And if we put that number at a certain threshold, then players will have to get kind of creative to figure out like, how do I do an insane amount of damage in one go? What kinds of things can I stack up? How do I? And it kind of hits a point where you're essentially almost like one-shotting most things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a thing that you have to like orchestrate under a certain set of circumstances that are kind of hard to do, right?
Well, especially because so much of the game is designed around damage over time systems. Right. So
or like buffs. So it's kind of the same, but like basically during combat, you become more powerful because of a bunch of buffs, right? It's like in a particular combat session. So you're not usually going to you can't really walk in and just fucking delete something. You kind of have to like ramp up.
You got to figure out how to make your different
so even
interact.
Even managing that where it's like, hey, I want to do like I want to do so much, like just a tremendous hit. But because you have this ramp up, then even if you know how to do the hit, you have to figure out, how do I fight something in a way that I don't just kill it before I finish that ramp so that I can then execute this.
You kind of need to fight like a sequence of creatures in increasing difficulty scale. It's like the small version, the medium version, the big version. They have like increasing amounts of health available to them, and you've ramped up all of your buffs, and then get that fight, and then
blast one of them somehow. Yeah. So there's all kinds of fun stuff like that. And then there's some of them are kind of like completionist based, so we had this kind of conversation where Sam was like, can we just have an achievement for 100%ing the game? And I was like, what are you even talking about? Like, what could that possibly mean?
Here's our door problem yet again, right?
Yeah. And so, Sam's like, well, you could like, what about getting every item? I'm like, the problem is, what's an item? Because everything in the game is technically an item, including the player, right? So like you can
put the player in your pocket,
dumb.
Technically.
This is dumb, but technically, if we coded it up to make this like a thing that you could have, like we could just put Flux yourself into your own inventory. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't be able to do anything with it, but Flux is an item, as is Juicebox and all the NPCs and the bosses. And, they
technically could
items.
all go into your pocket.
So they have to change it to like every craftable item or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then another question is like, well, do you just need to unlock it or do you need to craft it? Because if you need to craft it, they'll need to keep track for each kind of item. Did you craft that one particular item? Which we may already be doing, right? But if we're not,
which we do for some things, but not for all things,
And so all of a sudden, like,
but that's still not 100%ing the game.
Yeah,
that's just an achievement about crafting, right? Yeah. And so then we're like, okay, what about quests? Well, some quests only exist to point you toward things you've missed.
Yeah.
So if you didn't miss it, then you won't get the pointer quest, right? Which means you just bypass it and the game you'll never complete that pointer quest. And some quests are mutually exclusive because of stuff like that. Or, every kind of rarely, but every now and then we will have a quest where it'll be like, oh yeah, do this, like talk to this person if you want to do thing A, and talk to this other person if you want to do thing B. And once you choose that, then you're locked out of the other branch, right? And so I think kind of similarly to we're talking about like Baldur's Gate as a point of comparison, where like you can't 100% Baldur's Gate.
Right.
Because whenever you talk to a character, you've got 3 or 4 dialogue options in that conversation, and you can only pick one.
Yep.
Which means you can't see every branch of that conversation. That's what makes it interesting, right? It's like things are a little bit different each time you play through. So we can't do that.
Yeah, ours are mostly because it's not, since we don't offer we don't really offer player choice in terms of missing out on, I don't know. It's not quite.
We let you choose what you do, but not what you say.
Yes,
that makes sense.
So,
and also, if we have an A or B choice, the outcome isn't like a permanent, completely different kind of experience than.
No, the few places where that happens, they're mainly just funny.
It's just
right?
add some flavor.
But there's basically there's all these variants to account then also for if you happen to enter this place before you've done some other thing,
or with this character, or whatever.
Yeah. And so basically with all those variants in there, then you can't even say just count the number of quests a person completes, because again, that doesn't mean anything in terms of finishing stuff. And then even beyond that, just this point about the crafted items or things you're tracking, it turns out that tracking, given the scale of the game, if you wanted to sort of have an open loop in the background that's tracking certain kinds of things, actually just adds a lot of overhead, right? Because we have how many modes, or how many of stuff do we have? There's a bajillion quests.
About 7,000.
Yeah. So there's 7,000 parts that make it.
In terms of quests, I think we're approaching 1,000 quests. And we have some couple of thousand items at least.
Yep.
But and again, some of those items, and again, an item is just a thing that can be in the game. So some items are just a camera anchor.
Yep.
That exists to pull the camera towards it. That's an item.
Map marker or something, right?
Yeah. So there's all these things. So if you wanted something about 100%ing, then you have to answer all these questions about what that means. So instead we kind of have what I call micro 100%ing achievements, which is do all of this, right? Yeah. So get all of the pets or find all 3 of this type of thing, and those are pretty cool. And then we got a few that are just that are designed to push players into experimenting with different ways of playing the game. Because I think we talked maybe one or 2 episodes ago about the idea of the play styles and equipment sets that we have in the game, where they're all about playing differently, right? So one of them is this tanky, take damage and absorb it and then send it back kind of a play style. One's about creating big fire patches and trying to keep enemies in them, stuff like that. And you can play through it however you want, right? But if you kind of get locked into one play style because it's just kind of what you've been doing, then as you're getting access to all these other interesting items, you may not realize how cool they are unless something kind of nudges you to jump into them and try them out. And so we have one achievement for each type of play style, basically. Yeah, and so we just kind of come up with a whole bunch of those for that and got those all hooked in. And then kind of like we were talking about earlier, where having the main menu was the thing that makes it feel like a game, right? Like having achievements in, it feels like the game is nearly done.
Yeah, I agree. It's main menu's on the front, right? Makes it feel like it's the start of a game, and then achievements on the back makes you feel like you actually finished a game.
Well, because it is also the last thing you do.
You can't.
You need to know what everything is in the game before you design achievements for that, right? So it feels where it's and it's also a polish point because it doesn't matter, for the game itself.
It doesn't make it hooks it listens to the game, but it doesn't influence the game. And so some other kind of fun stuff then was as we're going through achievements, we're looking at the different game modes. So what we have at the moment in Crashlands 2 is we got chill mode, adventure mode, and challenge mode. So the game defaults to adventure mode, which is kind of like the default like baseline.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Yeah, balanced for like somebody who's decent at games and new to Crashlands 2, right? And then, or decent at like more like games like, action-y kinds of games, right? And then we got our chill mode where we've made it so that like mistakes are less costly, but also there are certain things that we've slowed down in the game.
This is for people who are either bad at games or don't want any stress while playing games, and I fall into both those categories. That's how I play.
Or people who just have some kind of disadvantage, like a cognitive issue or something like that. That also, we want to make sure that we have something like that to give people a little bit more breathing room if they need it, right? So with stuff like that, we've got like creatures take a little bit longer to do their attacks.
And they wait a little longer afterwards. Like they pause.
Yeah, they give you like a little bit more of a moment to get in there and hit them.
Explodey plants give you a little more time to run away before they blow you up. Then
that sort of stuff. So there's stuff like that where the default way of kind of like balancing difficulty of a game that a lot of people use is just make things hit less hard and have more or less health.
You have the damage sponge problem, right? Which you've probably heard about in any kind of, frankly, especially in looter shooters, but like Borderlands, where enemies don't really get harder to fight because the reality as far as of an FPS is that things just kind of need to be able to be shot. Otherwise, it's not really fun. So you can't make enemies like turbo fast, right? Go faster and faster because then like you literally can't actually shoot them. But in the case of Borderlands, then what are you left with? And it's like, okay, well, the enemies, they hit harder and they just absorb. You just have to fight them for longer. The problem from a balance standpoint is that is rarely fun. It's almost universally not fun. In fact, to just be like,
it just takes more ammo and
it's kind of boring, right? So you have this idea that like, okay, it's challenging because enemies take longer to kill. But if that's the only thing that's happening, then very frequently you actually just make the game challenging because it's boring as fuck, right? You see this in frankly, a lot of games. It's very hard.
And we have joked about adding boring mode to Crashlands 2, where we basically do that. And we literally call it boring mode, where it's like, enemies just have 10x HP.
Just take forever.
So do you.
Cooldown timers take longer.
Yeah, everything's just super boring.
Yep.
We're not planning on doing that, but it would be kind of funny. So we were like, okay, how do we modulate the difficulty of this, but in a way that actually meets the player where they are? And
you want to make it more fun when it's harder, not less fun, right? Like more fun for that kind of player.
Exactly. Because fun is just about, we've talked quite a long time ago about this idea of like there's this kind of like challenge curve, like a flow channel where like if things are too hard, they become frustrating. And if they're too easy, they become boring. And fun is the middle, right? Mm-hmm. And so in a game like Crashlands 2, where it's this action combat and it's about like evading attacks and counter attacking in combat, then the rest of the game is not really where the challenge is per se, right? Like harvesting plants, that's not hard, right?
They kind of just sit there,
They just sit there and get chopped. So we don't need to like make it take longer to harvest plants, or we don't need like crafting to take more materials, etc. It really kind of just comes down to like the more fast twitch aspects of the game. And so to avoid the damage sponge problem, we can play with speeds and timing instead. And we do give the player a bit more health, so that if you do mess up and get hit by something, then it's less punishing. But it's, we're more focused on just like the time, like giving you more time to do stuff.
Yeah. And I will say that one of the challenges with the original game is that as far as we talked about increasing the complexity of combat to make it possible to have more of these levers to do stuff with. And like, these are levers we just didn't have in the first one because all the creatures
the game was a little bit more two-dimensional in the first one.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing my own playthrough over this past week, starting a new playthrough on challenge mode, which is the hardest mode. And immediately, for me, I was like, this isn't hard enough. Like I feel like I'm just like, cause I know how to play the game, and so I'm just kind of like shredding these enemies. And we aren't like giving enemies more health in the challenge mode, but they weren't attacking fast enough, basically. So this week I kind of like jacked up their attack speed and their run speed a little bit more. so that when you fight them, like you've got to be more on your toes. And we do reduce your health so that enemies are attacking faster. And then if you take a straight hit, then it's going to hurt more. I've been having a blast with it. That's
great
because it's it puts the difficulty I think where it should be, which is about like reaction and like speed of thinking and acting, and not just.
It also pushes it into a bit more of a kind of a Souls approach, because one of the things we do, and this happens in standard mode too, in adventure mode, is that when you die, you drop a little decoy basically as you warp back home, and the decoy holds a portion of the stuff you had, right? Yeah. So not your actual equipment that you use to fight things, but like just all the stuff,
crafting materials, basically.
Yeah, and because it's coming from your infinite inventory, there's a lot of shit that you.
Especially as the game goes on, like it'll be like
because in original Crashlands. So in original Crashlands, what would happen is when you died, I think we would drop like 15 of the most recent crafting materials that you had picked up. Yeah. Well, 15 is not really. I think in original Crashlands it was a little bit more because you chopped things down one at a time, right?
Right.
But in Crashlands 2, because we use this telegraph thing, harvesting is a lot more like, oh yeah, I'm chopping like 4 plants at once, and I just picked up like 12 items in one go, right? And so 15 is just not enough.
Yeah. But again, we also wanted like another lever where you could like, okay, if we turn this up, how does it change the feel of the game? And what's interesting is in challenge mode, that's turned up all the way. So when you die, you just drop all of your shit in that decoy.
All your crafting materials are in there, and you got to go back and retrieve them.
Yeah. And the question is like, okay, so how does it make it fun? And it's like, well, because when you're in challenge mode, the combat is really intense. And so what's fun about that, like in a Souls context, is also that you have to go back to where you just got murdered by something and deal with it, right? To get your shit back. And like that, having to do that
which is either you being like, I can't really deal with this. I got to figure out how to like lure this creature away, or get in there and like stun the creature and then try to quickly grab my.
Yeah, these little story moments, right?
Where you're go in with your invisibility mechanism.
Sneak in, try to get it before you get hit, that sort of nonsense. So it's a lot of fun. It changes the feel of the game considerably, right? Which is the whole point of these different modes, not just damage punch.
But it also still works the same way as in the original, where because you drop. Because I remember one of the times I died, I saw the number of things, and it was like 2,000 something, and I was like, "Whew, that's a lot. That's a lot of things." But
safely storing 2,000 items for
when I got
like, oh god.
Because then you teleport back home, right? So then I'm like, oh well, I'm home. I'll go see if I can craft anything. It was like, oh, I can actually still craft some things because I had way more than that, and so
chill mode only drops.
I think you drop like a quarter of your items in chill mode.
Yeah. So, but it kind of, at least in chill mode, then it like threads that needle of like, well, I could probably get away with not going and getting it back.
But there's 2,000 items out there.
Yeah. But so it allows you to be like, it still gives you that breather where you're like, I'm going to go do some other stuff for a bit. Kind of like, kind of like get my brain back after whatever exciting thing just happened, and then go deal with it rather than being like, fuck, I have to go do this right now. And
I think generally in the other 2 game modes, it's the case that when you die and you see these giant numbers of loot dropped, even when you're turn based, you can still build stuff. And so it's this, I don't know, but it's like a punishment that doesn't 100% exist, but then is a reward if you go back to get stuff. You know what I mean? Like it kind of is in that nice spot.
Because it is still costly to have harvested all that stuff, and reharvest it would be very expensive in your time. So like, you got to at some point go deal with it. But the fact that unlike in, like a Valheim or something, where it's like, you're just naked now. So good luck.
You got good luck
playing the game at all. Yeah.
Yep. So I remember in the original game we experimented with stuff like you would die and all your equipment would fly off of your body.
Yeah, it just sucked.
And we even had it so that if you died next to water, then the loot drops that came out of your body would not discern where they were going to land, and some of them would land in the water and just be gone forever. Which
turned out to not be very fun,
a bit too intense, too hardcore. Well, and if you're trying to make it so that the player can recover from that, if you have items that are like a chain of crafted items, right, where it's like, oh yeah, you craft this and then you use that as an input to craft the next thing. So that's what we did with the tools in the first game. Of like your saw would, you'd craft it into the next saw and whatever. Yeah, well, that would
could be
mean that
pretty
like
expensive.
if you lost that, you'd have to go back and recraft, 10 things deep in the chain.
It also means you
which
can't
sucks.
actually make unique items, right?
Yeah.
Because like you can't
they're just
get
gone
like
now.
if a player gets them, they could just nuke them forever, and that's just sucks.
That sucks. Yep. Yeah. So because we have all these levers, and we even have stuff like in challenge mode, the fishing is harder. Because like we have like a little skill based mini game in the fishing. And when I was playing on challenge mode, I was like, this isn't a challenge.
Yeah,
I'm on challenge mode. This should be a challenge.
We should be updating the fishing game to make it so that there's more levers, I guess, from the jump.
Yeah.
Which kind of interesting.
But so what's kind of fun about this then is we can kind of see we can always add more and more of these levers and add more game modes depending on what people are interested in. Because it's a pretty cheap way for us to add replay value to the game.
Yeah, the cost is basically in the testing of being like, how does this feel? How
does it feel? Yeah.
Takes some time.
Right up until if we wanted to do like a hardcore mode where now that's like some new mechanics there where we have to figure out what happens when you die in hardcore.
Because we have to figure out how to kill you in real life.
Yeah, that's the most hardcore.
A complicated mechanism.
Yeah. And we do have a button as developers that just kills your character. And when I was playing on adventure mode, the only times I ever died was when I accidentally pushed that button because it was next to the open the quest log button. So I'm worried about testing hardcore mode and accidentally just pushing that button and killing myself.
My favorite thing when we were doing a bunch of those boss overhauls was I thought there's a button for just killing a boss. Because I was trying to test what basically the sequence happened. At the
so
end.
you can view the boss ending.
Yeah, it's
without fighting it each time.
I misremembered it as the one that kills you, so I walked in confidently, hit the button, and then just got fucking.
Just died.
I was like, oh,
right, that's wrong. That's the wrong button. Yeah, so everything's coming along. We're just like cinching up all these little things that have to happen at the end. And coming up next, I'll be working on the mobile controls this next week. Trying to get to that spot of like, we don't want the mobile controls to be fine. Like we want them to be good or even great.
Which is right now they're fine. They're fine. They get the job done. They're not bad, but they're.
I've got a few ideas for how to make them good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so they're not. It's just not quite there.
You want to turn that over before we.
Yeah, and I think importantly, it's right now the mobile controls are because it's been a long time since we made a mobile game that has like this amount of shit on the screen that you need to like be interacting with.
It's more like Quadrupus basically than.
Yeah, it's closer to Quadrupus Rampage. And the funny thing is that Quadrupus Rampage generally got good reviews from players about the controls. And when we were building this like current version of the Crashlands 2 controls, we looked at games that were closer in complexity. So we looked at like
the Wild Rift, League of Legends,
Fortnite
lays out there, that sort of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. First-person shooters or mobile arena MOBA games, stuff like that. And we kind of co-opt like lots of different design elements and ideas from how those work because we're like, well, this is what players are used to, So and also like it must be pretty good because like this is what all these companies are doing.
These are multi-million-dollar companies, so you feel like they probably did some more research on how to do this right?
Yeah, and so so we kind of roughly replicated those styles of thing, and then anyways, as we play, we're just like, this what? No, like Quadrupus Rampage is better. And so
kind of like I don't know how to put it, like almost like a radial layout of stuff, but not.
It's like having the buttons more in like an arc shape.
Pie slices. That's what
like pie slices.
Pie slices.
Yeah, just because like your thumb, if there's any buttons that are far from your thumb, then it's more likely that you miss them because you got no tactile feedback. So you got to reach for things. And that kind of arc movement is like one of the easiest, most natural movements for your thumb to make. And once you have to like tuck your thumb back to hit something in the corner of the screen or like reach it way up on the edge of the screen, it's very weird.
Or if your thumb is constantly hiding buttons.
Yeah, your thumb is obscuring.
Yeah, because on mobile you never get like used to the tactile experience of feel like you can with a controller, where it's just like, oh yeah, I know if I move my thumb and I kind of feel something, then that's going to be the right button. But on mobile you don't have that, and so if the thing is obscured from view and your thumb gets a little off track, then you can't even see the button until you like lift your thumb all the way off and look at it, in the corner.
It's actually my core. Weirdly enough, like as much as I left the one touch aspect of the original game. One of the things that always bothered me the most was the fact, like,
your hands in the way of
exactly.
everything all the
You're just,
time.
like, touching the middle of the screen constantly, so you can't actually I don't know, you can't see the creature you're fighting because you're tapping on it. You know what I mean? It's
And so we're like, we need to take inspiration from our own good ideas.
Well, I think part of it though is also that from an engineering standpoint is that once you move away from just square buttons or circular buttons, you're just in more complex.
You're in custom
UI hell.
Custom job.
Yeah, and so a big part of it is also just that, which is like you want to on the engineering side be able to just use some damn square buttons or
just make a grid of buttons.
Yeah, how bad could it be, right? Turns out pretty bad. So we got some fixes up to do there.
Yeah, so we'll be playing around with that, trying to see if we can make that easier, more intuitive. Because I mean, it is a more actiony game compared to the first one, and if you die in combat or whatever because of controls jank,
it just never feels good.
You missed a button. Yeah, it just sucks. Like, and so we're gonna do whatever we can to make a flat pane of glass a responsive control scheme. You know? So things are coming along super good. So we just want to kind of give everybody an update on, where all that is, and we'll have more to say next week, and as we bear down on the beta and then get ready for launch. So we got some time. Let's get into some questions. Highest upvoted question comes from Jumpylumpa Leapylow, aka Degeki, who says, "What is your most favorite part of getting older? What is your least favorite part of aging?"
The least favorite part is just I guess the thing that's kind of universally true is everybody's body slowly gets worse as we get older. There are other things also that can get bad, but those are a little more individualized, as you get older.
I would say that's only true after like 25. Up until that point, it actually kind of gets better.
Yeah, it gets better, and then it starts to go. For me, it was like 28 was when stuff started to be like, okay, I've hit the peak of like my body just being an acceptable piece of machinery, and then things started to happen, and I just started to go from there. And the whole joke of like, as you start pushing like 40, the whole idea of like, now if you get out of bed and you look to the left too early, then now your neck is broken. That stuff starts to happen. So to me, like that's the nice universal, like that's just true. But that also kind of makes it boring because it's like, that's the worst part of getting old. Is you're old now, like as you're kind of falling apart. Otherwise there's no downsides in my opinion.
No, I think from a personal standpoint, I think as you get older, one of the most interesting things is how when you look back, I would say if you're keeping any notes at all about the stuff that's troubled you, you look back and you see that it's always the same stuff, at least for me, which is kind of funny, which is like if I look at my resolutions or some of my journals from 10 years ago or something or my workflow, the things that I'm complaining about or that are giving me some like emotional wobbliness during any given week are basically always the same thing, which in some weird way, like it used to be the case that I was always searching for some way to like some answer to those things. And part of, I think, what getting older lets you realize is which ones are kind of like inherent because of how your brain works. Just like ways that.
Yeah, you're like, this isn't a problem to solve. It's just a fact.
Yeah, it's sort of, and again, it's not to say that you should sort of like accept and not, have any responsibility toward trying to make it better, right? I've never been one.
You can mitigate things or control them a bit.
But I think it's recognizing the sort of things that like are not going to be solved, but can only be mitigated, and how that's not like it's not a problem. It's just
not necessarily. Well, I think if we can zoom out on that a little bit, and even outside of the whole like problem solution space, I think it's the self-discovery aspect, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Whether or not the thing you discovered was like a solution to a problem, or just like, oh, that's how that works, I think so much of self-discovery is about like, oh shit, that thing that's been like plaguing my whole life. Now I understand it, and now I can either mitigate it or accept it because at least I know what it is, right?
Well, I think it's not an either or. I think that's tricky.
That's true. You can accept it and still work.
Yeah, actually, I think that's actually.
That's actually a very good point. As I know for me, like as I've gotten older, I've kind of stabilized around the things that I give a shit about in just more of a neutral way.
Yes.
Right. where I no longer beat myself up about the stuff that I'm like, I wish that I was doing X, or I wish that I was Y, right? Those haven't like gone away, and I don't even necessarily disagree with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that I'm not upset about it. It's just an
you see them
observation,
for what they are, right? In
Yeah.
some ways, which is like oftentimes they're counters to the things that you are good at. So for example, like I thought I was having a bad time with my sleep this last couple of weeks. I looked through my notes for whatever I don't know exactly why I saw it, but like it's always been the same. Where it's like every fucking year since I've been keeping track of anything and making resolutions or else, it's always like, this year I'm gonna figure out how to go to bed on time. It's been fucking at least 12 years of tracking this, and I've gotten better.
Yep.
But also, it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, it's not like a me thing right now. You know what I mean? It's a me thing in a very permanent sense.
It's just a core part of who you are. Is you're bad at going to bed on time.
I'm bad at going to bed on time. But what am I
and
good
you
at?
survived it for 12 years, so like
yeah. And it's like, but what am I good at? And it's like, oh, well, getting really into shit, right? And like cranking things out, which kind of happens to be like this constant exploration mode that I'm always in, which is annoying. The flip side of it is that oftentimes I'll lose sleep because I'm, reading some new stuff or playing some new games or whatever. But I'm always taking notes about those things, and that kind of what fuels the creative side. So it's like, okay, I think it's seeing the relationship between the things that you want changed, that you've always wanted changed, and what your strengths are as you get older, as opposed to just seeing the downsides of those things is kind of the nice thing.
I think there is kind of a related, like, hybrid good bad thing to this, right? Which is sometimes when you have one of those discoveries of a thing you just didn't understand before about yourself or the world around you, right? And how that impacts you. And then you do finally come to learn that thing. It's this mixed bag that's like always good and bad, because the good part is like now you get it and you can again accept it and or mitigate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you also are now looking back and you're like, God damn it.
I wasted so much time not knowing this.
Yeah, and so for me, it's like, there's a few of those. It's like some of the obvious ones are like, I learned in my early 30s, I had aphantasia, which is the inability to picture things in your brain. It's one of those things you'd think in 30 years I would have figured that shit out, because I
think it's more that you always knew that you couldn't do that, but
I didn't understand that
what you learned was that other people could.
Exactly. And so all of a sudden I understood a fundamental thing about why there were certain categories of like interaction with other people and trying to do certain kinds of tasks and stuff that were like always seemed insanely hard. And I was historically beating myself up about, And all of a sudden I was like, holy shit. I didn't realize with the discovery that there could be that big of a fundamental difference between like how my brain works and how most other people's brain works.
And you can just not know it.
And just not know it. So to me, that was a fundamental turning point in how I like viewed myself and my brain and other people, right? And then that led into later on, like we talked about the podcast a bunch, ADHD and autism diagnoses, and like discovering again and again, like, holy shit, like how is it possible to live this long, decades, having these really fundamental differences, and then also realizing as part of that process that like there's no such thing as like neurotypical. We have a word for it, but it actually just means not in a specific category of like a neurotype, like autistic, right? So it's always used in contrast to some named labeled thing, but it's also not real because we've each got our own individual grab bag of differences that we all, and if you can take a difference as big as aphantasia or autism or ADHD and not be aware of it for decades, how much little shit that's just a fundamental difference.
Oh, yeah. Infinite. There's infinite things. And even when people talk about like masking, right, which is a term that's become much more like widely understood.
Yeah, not masking in like the putting a mask together.
Yeah, masking as in essentially behaving outwardly differently than how you are internally in order to fit in and make other people more comfortable, right? Yeah. And it's not something that like only certain types of people do. It's just a matter of degrees, right? Yeah. Like everybody, like if you go to your family reunion and you're, we always talk about like the racist uncle or whatever, right? And you're like, well, I could cause a scene or just fucking get through it, right? If you just decide to get through it, that's masking, right? Like that's you just saying like, I'm just going to pretend I didn't hear that, or whatever, right?
You should make a scene though, just to.
You should, yeah.
Well, yeah, understandably people don't.
Yeah, you go to your spouse's work Christmas party, right? You're like, I don't know or like any of these people, but I'm just gonna pretend like I'm having fun.
Yeah, and like any marginalized group has been doing this their whole life, so it's completely
exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
and in certain contexts, it's referred to as code switching, which is like in this context you behave this way, in this context you behave another way.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And masking is a little bit different concept because it's more about like the fundamentals of your being, because often like with code switching, it's not literally you're a different person, you're just kind of like switching how you do stuff, but not in a way that is like necessarily is unnatural to you, because all social interactions and how they work are made up, the way people talk and all this stuff, right? And so masking tends to mean more in that domain, but it's all
a matter of degrees. Yeah. And so for me, kind of one of the things that I like about getting older is the recognition that like I used to think that I was very different from other people in a whole bunch of like really important ways. And now I think we're all a lot more similar than we realize, but we've just had a lot of different experiences. And then like we have these things that are different in degrees, and they can manifest in these big ways. But I think internally, like we tend to exacerbate them by hyper focusing on the fact that it's different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's like for me, that was my non-religious side when I was in college, and kind of like getting a handle on that. And once I found people who were like me, then I could only view everything through that lens. Like everything was either pro-religious and I was pissed off about it, or it was anti-religious and I was pumped about it, And
it's an identity.
It just didn't really
turning parts of yourself into identities, right?
Yeah, and but also recognizing that, like, even for people who would consider themselves religious, like for some, this is a really weird thing, but like when I was driving back home today from dropping my dog off at daycare, I was thinking about the United Kingdom. I don't know why. I was thinking about the United Kingdom.
Tell me about it. It happens to me every day. What are they doing over there?
And I was like, what is that? Because it's a kingdom of united like countries, basically, right? That's why it's called the United Kingdom. And I started thinking about Wales, right?
The country, not the
country,
not the mammal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was trying to think about, what do I know about Wales? And I don't know a fucking thing about Wales.
Yep.
And there's this hole in my brain where Wales could be, but there's nothing, right? And there are other people who are from there and know literally everything about it.
Their brain's full of whales. Okay.
Yeah. When somebody mentions Wales, like they have this deep reserve of all kinds of information and knowledge about that place that literally doesn't exist for me, right? Like if you told me it was a city, I'd be like, is it? I'll have to double check on that, And so there's just this idea that, like, I don't know, like I think as I've gotten older, I've been able to recognize more that you don't know what you don't know.
It's also okay. It's weird. I think when you're younger, it feels generally. I think when you're younger,
you can't know everything.
When you're younger, it's very easy, or I guess not even younger. When you're very passionate about something, or something's very true or like important to you, I feel like when you're younger, it's easier to have like almost an angry response when people don't already know about it. You know what I mean?
Because you know so much about it, and it seems unreasonable that somebody else could not have come to the same conclusion.
I think I have kind of the opposite stance on that whole thing. And so the one thing I think actually we're all more different than we are similar in the fact that I don't see all this and be like, oh, the differences are actually minor and really we're all fundamentally the same. I see it as, oh, there's like infinite degrees and types of differences. Really, we're all different from each other, and that's interesting, right? That's my angle on it is that we are the same as each other because we all have insane numbers of blind spots that we don't even understand, right? And that makes us all we're
similarly ignorant, right?
But we're not similarly ignorant. You're talking just about similarly ignorant as a matter of degree, but not as a matter of detail. The details matter,
Oh yeah.
We're all ignorant about something, but it's also
I say we're all dumb in a whole bunch of ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where I'm coming from.
And I also think that it makes sense to be mad about the idea of like people being unaware of something, because unawareness of certain things causes your behavior to be a certain way towards that thing, right?
Mhm.
And that can impact other people in really negative ways. And so, so I think it's one of those things where it's reasonable to have those reactions and to have strong opinions, and it also is reasonable if you have things because to me it's one of the things that drives me.
It's not carte blanche though. It's not like you get a free pass to just like be mad at people for not knowing things.
No, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Well, what I'm getting is like because it's all context, right? It's like
I'm also not saying you don't have a right to be mad, right? When someone could know something, doesn't, or just is wrong about something, right?
I think could know something does it's tricky because like you could know everything about whales to Seth's point, but you don't, right?
Yeah, because it just hasn't really come up.
There's not
as something that would
mean? Like there's a context thing there as far as like what it means for you.
Well, I think an interesting point. So like I went to the Global Game Jam this past weekend, which was super fun. I didn't participate. I just watched, and because I've made so many games and because I've done so many game jams, I have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. So people would put together a team and they'd be like, oh yeah, here's our team of 6 people. What engine are we using? We don't know yet. This person maybe has used Godot before once. This other person has never programmed before, right? And like as I kind of hear even just like what who is on the team, and like basically what their starting set of assumptions are, I have a pretty good sense of what problems they're going to run into, what's going to be hard for them, how they're going to disagree, the scale of the game they're going to be able to make, what kind of game they're going to make, but I can't tell them that.
It won't matter if you tell them.
It won't matter because they need to experience it to actually know why I know that, right? because I've seen this thing a bunch of times in a bunch of different ways, but that information is useless to somebody who has yet to experience it, right? Like because your mind needs to be configured in a way where it's able to receive certain types of information. And until that configuration happens, it literally can't. Like it can't get in there. And so I do agree, Adam, with your general point that like it is still infuriating to come across willful ignorance, right? When somebody has taken a position on something and outright refuses to flex on that position, even when evidence and facts and reality and everything else just keeps battering them nonstop with contradictory information, and they just kind of double down. Mm-hmm. I hate it. I hate that, and it is something that I do get irritated about. I'm more talking about just general giving people grace for things that they haven't yet had the opportunity to be willfully ignorant about when they don't know. They just don't know.
I think it just depends on the consequences of.
Yeah, they would agree on that. Yeah,
right. Yeah, because I'm not going to give anybody grace for being a racist piece of shit, even if they.
Yeah, I know that's the angle you're going toward. I think it depends.
No, but I don't think it has to go all the way there. I'm just saying like that. That's an end point of like that sort of concept of like, well, if people don't know, it's not reasonable to be sort of mad about that, right? Because people don't know what they don't know, and it's not always somebody's fault, even if the thing that they don't know has bad consequences, right? That isn't. People aren't always willfully doing the bad thing, right? But I don't think they have to be doing it willfully for us to be very reasonably very mad and pissed off at the person for whatever they're doing, Mm-hmm. And also to the identity thing is also part of why too. Like there's a thing that you see non-autistic people say all the time that this kind of reminds me of the idea of like if you just stopped thinking about being autistic so much, it wouldn't be such a big deal, right? It's like kind of like don't label yourself autistic, right? Because now you're thinking of everything in the lens of autism, and people do this also for any marginalized identity, right? Where it's like if you just stop talking about it, right? And the reality is, it's like no, because your entire lived experience is determined by that fundamental difference. The problem of the categorization comes in when there's no nuance also applied to it, right?
Yeah,
and you can like use it
because it is different.
Because it is different. Yeah, it's fundamentally different. And you can use it stupidly.
It's for
that's
like
true,
how many eggs you got in your basket, okay, from an identity standpoint. I think is a big question. Because I saw this with them.
And how much do they cost?
Well, a lot these days. But like when it comes to like the cancer survivor stuff, right? Like I met a lot of other cancer survivors where it's like, again, because it's such a big thing and again, to your point, I'm like can define kind of everything about you for a long period of time, if not the rest of your life, then it's very easy for it to become like the only thing to you.
Yeah.
And I think largely when people say something like, hey, maybe quit focusing on X thing that you're focusing on so much from an identity standpoint, it's usually actually what they're saying is it's almost like you shouldn't be saying like focus less on that, but just like, are there other parts too? Because I'm only seeing one piece of you in terms of like some particular.
Yeah. Well, it also depends on like, is it something that is changeable or that you would want to change, right? That's when it comes to certain aspects of identity, like most of the ones are not fundamentally changeable, right? So being like, in your case, a cancer survivor did two things. One is it created an event that happened in the past, right? And so your like identity as cancer survivor is actually defined by that event and how you responded to it and now how you think about it today, right? But, and that shapes you still today, right? Mm-hmm. But in a way that's different than
it's something that's moving further into the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Over time.
Yeah. So it's but in a way where, so you can kind of like over time, you can like change and adapt how you think of that thing and how it impacts you exactly. But it will always have fundamentally shaped who you are today for the rest of time. Right. But in ways that you have some control over because it's based on something that happened. Rather than something that is.
Right. But then there's the lingering reality of it, right? Which is like having been in a group, you can't get life insurance, or if I feel a bump, if I feel a bump, it's a very different scenario.
Well, there's just the constant fear of any possible sniffle or sleeplessness or sweating or whatever. And you're just like, oh God.
Yep. So it's like, so there's
and it's reasonable because because I would never be like, Sam, could you just relax?
Just quit thinking about it, Sam.
Just quit thinking about it. Because it's like, it's very understandable that's.
But this is what I'm saying is where Sam has this deep reserve of life experience about what that was like. Like, I don't have that.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have anything there. Right. And so for me, like part of aging, and like my experience was having a brother who had cancer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Extremely different kind of an experience, right?
Yeah. Which was a horrible experience for me.
Right. Different.
But I would argue not nearly as horrible as it was for Sam.
But even outside of degree, because I agree with that too.
Yeah,
but
I
even
think
outside of degree,
right?
Nobody would argue it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also true that even outside of degree, just fundamentally different. Dimensionality.
It's just different. Yeah.
It's just a different kind of a thing.
And so the way that event, shaped me is different from the way that it shaped Sam and you, Adam, right? Like in the same way that it's like all three of us have ADHD, but what does that mean? Because each of us, it expresses itself differently.
Very differently, yeah.
And so we've all had similar yet different experiences about it, and it has shaped the way each of us think about ourselves in different ways from each other, right? And so that's the kind of thing I think as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate more just how differently varied people can, how varied like human experience can be, and how you can take so many different things away from it. And that, you might meet somebody and you might start talking to them and have a sense of like who they are based on like what you see or their accent or,
or
whatever
even if
else.
they say I got ADHD, right? You're like, oh, okay, I understand what that means. But you,
but you just don't. Like you just have no fucking idea who this person is.
And that's the right takeaway, right? Of having life experience that's nuanced, where because when I describe myself as autistic, I don't mean it in a way that actually conveys much information, because I know it can't. Because the autistic experience, and any autistic person will tell you, like if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, right? And that's true for any kind of,
that's all the people actually, right?
Yeah, any kind of aspect of identity, right, intersects with the rest of your aspects of identity to come up with something unique. And I think you can either, as you get older, entrench your bad, non-nuanced beliefs. They don't have to be bad beliefs. It's bad that they are not nuanced, right?
Right.
About some category, because you never bothered to like understand the beauty of the nuances of that category, so that when you meet somebody who you can put into some label, that you're just like, oh, I know what that means because I know what the label is, right? Rather than giving you a starting point to say like, okay, there are some things that could mean. And that helps me start to build a picture as I start to like work with the rest of the details. Yeah. But ultimately what it really means is like, come to a person as they are.
I would say it's very similar to the door problem we talk about a lot, which is like in game design when someone says we have a doors in this game, the first thing, you now basically have a large number of questions to ask to be more specific about what they mean by that, right? And it's basically, to me, like the identity thing, the labels thing is actually the same, where it's no longer an end point, right? It's a starting point. So if someone says, like, oh, I'm autistic, do you have a bucket of questions that you can ask at this point about what that experience has been like? If I'm a cancer survivor, do you have a bucket of questions? Or are you just like, oh, I've met one before, so I know I understand, you know? And
it's the same idea as like, why is somebody who, you know, is part of some identity doesn't get to speak for everybody else who shares that aspect of their identity, right?
Well, this is what I think is so, and this is something that I'm still kind of like processing myself. But like, for example, if I meet somebody and very early into meeting them, they tell me that they have ADHD. For some reason, that annoys me because having it myself and knowing so many people who do have it, I realize that it doesn't tell me anything about who you are and what you're all about. Because the way that you experience it is just going to be so different from everybody else.
It doesn't annoy me for two reasons. The first one is because people who are newly diagnosed to stuff are learning about it, and they also
and it's all they can think about.
So I'm like, I want to give people room for
which is why I'm like I know that I'm wrong to be annoyed.
I think about like people who tell you their MBTI at some point earlier. Like, it's the same where they're like, I'm an ENFP.
You're like, that's all right. Well, let's just blow past that because I want to know about you. Tell me about you.
It's so much that like it's a way, it's trying to have a shorthand of saying something about yourself that really should invite more questions, but typically people don't ask those questions.
Well, I think that's exactly it. Yeah. If it's presented as a way as a starting point, then I think that works. Or if it's in a moment where someone's like behaving ADHD like, right, and they're like, got ADHD, it's pretty understandable in that moment to be like, oh, okay, I just have a sense of like what's going on, and that this person is aware of the fact that they're behaving in a way they're not supposed to be behaving, right? Because that's so much of why like I present myself fairly autistic first explicitly, because I know that my default behavior is not what people expect, and if I give people a reason for that, then they'll kind of just leave me alone about it, right? But I don't always do it because it depends on if I start to feel like I'm doing something where I'm like, oh wait, I'm not controlling my face right, then I'm like, okay, time to just tell people, you know, so that I could just get around that really quick. But there is that nuance there of like, why are you? And for me, the other part of it too is that there are so many people who are figuring that process out. They're newly diagnosed or thinking they might be, whether it's ADHD or autism, or just don't know what it means, have lots of assumptions about it. And by me presenting myself in that way first, I'm forcing somebody to confront the fact that when they heard it, they're like, wait, I guess I don't know what that means, because their experience of me is not what they expect. And so I use that opportunity to basically say like, here's an example of what that can look like in a way that's not specifically about inviting questions or anything else, or even trying to inform somebody of something. It's actually just trying to be like, all right, here's an opportunity for you to have your expectations violated explicitly. You know, so
but it's also a weird way to put your interactions in a box. So I got onto Blue Sky for one day, and there was something about it that really just bugged the shit out of me. Which like I'm not really a Twitter user, right? I wasn't.
So you're probably already in the wrong room, but carry on.
But it's bios, which is everybody announces what they are. Whether I'm a liberal, you know, I'm a Southern blah, I'm a software engineer, whatever it is. Like people put a list of what they are in their bio, and somehow that's supposed to say something about who you are, and it just fucking doesn't. And all it does really is predefine what types of interactions you're going to have with people, because people are going to prejudge all kinds of shit about what you've put in there. The list of
that's both true, but also the point, right?
Yeah, but also again, like I disagree for the same reasons, right? Because like my bio has like ADHD plus autistic in it, right? And you're assuming I'm doing that, or that people are doing that because they're trying to advertise who they are, which is not what I'm doing. I'm trying to make it so that if somebody does a search for ADHD or autism, there's a decent chance that I come up. And again, they get to see an example of a person that has those labels and what that can look like, which for me is mostly for other people who either know they have those things or think they might and are trying to explore that space, see positivity around it, see examples of it, see examples of the nuance around it, right? So I'm not doing it so that I'm trying to show who my clan is, right? I'm trying to do it so that people find examples that aren't the other kinds of stuff that people do find, which is a lot of bullshit around that kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah.
So I agree with you that people can do it for these various reasons, right? But I think
it's different. The difference of like if you meet a stranger in person and you have no idea anything about their background or whatever, right? And you can have a conversation with them. You know, you wouldn't at some point be like, well, of course you would say that because you're one of these things, right? Whatever category, right?
Yeah, I would never do that to anybody, period. Yeah,
right, but people do that online.
Oh, yeah.
All the time, right? Because because people put themselves into buckets, and it's easy to like attack a bucket. Like it's easy to attack a category and just be like, just lump somebody into that category and then just dismiss them out of hand because you've prejudged that category of people. And I don't know, it's just something that feels, I don't know.
Okay.
It feels like it takes the humanity out of the interactions, and it turns things into categories.
It's basically it's a design problem on an individual basis, which is if someone says, hey, you got to put a bio together that anybody who wants to interact with you through this thing is going to see first. Your two options are basically, put what you think is relevant information in there for the kind of people who you're wanting to kind of self-select for, or things that you think are important to people to know about you, or two, essentially put nonsense in there because you think it's nonsense, right? And the thing is, I guess the general sort of is
every one of those things says something.
It
invites a certain type of person to interact with you or not interact with you.
Yeah. The reality is nobody reads bios, so it doesn't actually matter. So
the internet's just the internet. I don't even.
It's a big deal.
I will say one of the things I wanted to get at, not even on this part of getting older, but the question of like stuff you don't like. Because there's something I don't like. It's not just like the health stuff. The number of like administrative stupid things.
God. Yeah.
That you have to manage as an adult is
fucking stupid.
The more I think about it, I'm just like, this is just all too much. You know what I mean? You got to do like, I don't know, retirement planning, 401k.
The bureaucracy of aging.
The bureaucracy of aging. Yeah. All the health insurance stuff. Every like 6 months, I got to go like argue with some home insurance people, you know, to make sure that I don't get ripped off. It's like the number of people who are just stabbing you trying to take money. I guess it's really annoying.
Yeah. As you get older, you become more entrenched in stuff. Like you have more things, you've got more assets,
more power, basically, right? And like power requires
which also
management.
means more responsibilities. yeah, exactly. Yeah, like once you have a house, then you've got to maintain the house, and you've got like you said, homeowners insurance, property taxes. You yourself have to reach out to contractors to fix things.
I think the thing is like,
you got to have your documents. You know?
I think when it comes to things that are real, that are physical, that cannot be avoided. So like the fact that owning a home like requires maintenance because it's a physical object in the world. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think
you can hate that, but conceptually
makes sense because it's just like things are happening. I think when especially given how much design work we do, when you're looking at the amount of stuff you do that's just has fake. That's fake. Like we've decided that this is how it works, and so like everybody has to deal with this particular annoying thing. Even just like doing taxes in the States, which is coming up here, it's so dumb.
I will say the problem of filing your taxes and dealing with health insurance is a problem unique to our country.
It is. But that's what I mean, where I'm like, it
doesn't have to be like that, which is why it's so fucking annoying.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of those things as I've gotten older, again, in knowing more about how the rest of, other cultures or other societies govern or whatever else, where you're just like, oh, wait. Well, this is a choice we've made that everybody just has to deal with this like on a very individual level, this really onerous.
Yeah, it would be fine if like nobody else has figured it out either.
Exactly.
And you're like, oh, I guess this is just a hard problem. No, it's not.
There's still things that nobody else does a good job of either.
Oh,
that
totally.
Also are still made up.
100%.
Like for me, like the big one is as you get older, as you get closer to, it's like, well, someday I don't get to work anymore, or it's like every day you're coming closer to that random day where you get disabled and can't work or whatever. Right? Like, so like when you're really young, it's like, it sucks a lot when you don't have money and all that kind of stuff. But you're like, well, I still got a lot of time left though to solve that. Right.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
As you get older, the amount of time left just keeps dwindling, and the amount of resources that you have to have. Cause like, if you're going to retire, hopefully when you're like in your 60s, right? Or around 70, I guess. Cause of course that keeps getting pushed up. then even at that point, the average person has to be able to stay alive for like 10 years.
Yeah.
With whatever resources you've accumulated at that point, right? And that keeps getting harder. No decisions are good because it's like, yeah, just put money aside into the stock market, which crashes every 8 years. So will it be crashed when you go to retire?
Yeah, hopefully you've timed it well,
Yeah, which you can't. There's just you don't get to make a single decision on purpose where you're like, yes, that outcome.
Yeah, but again, like this is because of the way
the shape of things, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying. Yeah, I'm saying it shouldn't be this way.
It doesn't have to be this way,
or at least,
but it makes more money this way for certain people.
Yeah, or at least you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things where like I get again like designing these things is fucking tremendously hard. There's a reason why like with regards to, I don't know, even if you talk about how you handle an elderly population or wherever else in the country, like these are tremendously hard like ethical issues, right? But there's like I feel like there's low-hanging fruit usually, just like we're sitting there that people have identified.
Well, yeah, because ethics aren't the primary concern for the solutions we have, right?
Yeah, generally.
Well, but there's also the problem of the cyclical nature of just being a person, which is like if things are good enough for long enough, then you start to take for granted all the reasons why that's the case, and start removing all of the the things that made it good.
Yep.
Right. Like we talked about in the past about even just like health stuff, right? Like you go to the gym for a few months and you're like, wow, like I'm feeling really good. Like I could probably scale back on my gym stuff. And then suddenly you stop going to the gym entirely and then you feel like shit again. Yep. And then now you got to start over. But societies work like that on a longer scale as well. Like things have to sometimes get real fucking bad. Yeah. For people to be like, wow, oh, geez, we probably should have worked harder to keep things good or make them better.
Which we're currently seeing with like vaccines, right? That's
and a couple other things.
And everything.
Yeah. But it's like, like the New Deal came out of the Great Depression.
Yep.
And like when we had a 94% tax rate at the highest tax bracket in the United States, that was after the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. We had the Great Depression because we didn't do that, right? And
then we slowly undid all of the things that.
Yeah, and everybody's like, "Wow, things are going so good. Let's just let rich people take everything again, right?" And then we do that for 30 years, and now here we are, right? And so, we're on a 100-year loop. And we can't really do anything about it because like, even though we can solve these problems and it's like, yep, that's good. Lock it in. Well, 50 years from now, it's a whole different set of people making decisions.
Greedy, selfish assholes will always return once everything.
They come back. It's like a swarm of locusts. They come out of the ground and they just eat everything.
Why should I have to get a vaccine? Nobody even gets polio anymore. It's like, it's because we get the fucking vaccine. Go get the fucking vaccine.
And they're like, bring it back. Let's go. So these things happen, and there's just no. And this is part of like, for me getting older, it's the recognition that nothing is really permanent. Yes. Things do happen cyclically like this, and it really fucking sucks that that's the case. Things can't just be good and stay good. The longer things have been good, the more likely they're about to go to shit, and vice versa. Like if things are bad for a while, and if they keep getting worse, then that creates pressure for people to finally say fuck it and just try something to try to make it better. And so it is unfortunate that is how things tend to go. But once you've been around for a little while, you start to see the pattern, and you're like, all right, well. This is one of the bad times. So buckle in and try to get through to the other end and do what you can to try to help push it in the direction of getting back on track,
I think to me, that was like that concept of this, like the big lie for me growing up was the idea that life becomes more stable and the world around you progresses towards being better, right?
Stability
creates
instability.
I felt like I was steeped in that belief system growing up of like, as you get older, you get a job, you start building retirement. Technology keeps making things more interesting.
It's kind of a steady march.
The world's becoming less racist and horrible. Like all this.
But you were taught that because that was true.
That wasn't
the people
as true
who
as
taught
we were
you
taught.
that. No. For some people it was.
For some people, sure.
And so and like I said, everybody has different experiences, but it's just nothing is permanent. Nothing stays forever, and it also helps you appreciate what you have when you have it.
Yeah. We're already way over time, but just
we're way over time.
On a more uplifting note, the other good thing for me about getting older is having my beard get wider and wider. Fucking love
It's
that
cool
shit.
shit.
Yeah, I'm getting I'm getting a little bit of grays in my goatee.
Yeah,
but
our dad now has like the grayest fucking.
he has a great beard.
He shaved it off the other day, dude.
What?
Oh.
I know. He came over. He was like, "By the way, I shaved off the
Lunacy.
beard." I was like, "No,
Shouldn't have
Bring it
done
back.
that. Yeah.
it's great. It's like a great, like full white, like captain
Santa
of a
Claus
fucking
beard.
sea ship sort of a vibe."
That
If
makes
he had
me
a,
for
if
the
he had a
first
pipe,
time-
I wouldn't blink.
Oh,
I'd be like,
100%.
yep, that fits.
You know how people who are like losing their hair and stuff, they get like mad at people who like don't do anything with their tame hair and stuff, you know?
Mhm.
I was always like, oh, it's dumb. Just let people do whatever. But knowing that dad shaved his beard off, I'm like, I think I get it now. Because
Yeah,
That was such a
can't
good
grow
look.
that. And if you can, why aren't you doing
Majestic.
it? It's majestic.
Yeah, as somebody who always hated my own hair, I don't really care what people do with their hair.
Exactly.
You know?
That's why I buzzed mine out. 'Cause I hate it.
Just do whatever you want.
Another thing about getting older, yeah. Just shave if you've hated dealing with your hair your whole life like I did.
Just shave that
just
shit.
fucking take it off.
Take it off.
It's delightful.
Nobody cares. Yeah, but also you could do that anytime. I did it when I was 26.
Yeah, I'm the same.
So,
Yep.
hey, all right, let's wrap it up. That's all the time we have for this week. I would like to thank our producers Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta for putting the podcast together, and thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the podcast archives. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam and give Crashlands 2 a wish list. And also, you can pre-order it on the App Store, and you can pre-register on Google Play. So whichever
those
mobile
words right.
device. Yep.
Nice job, man.
So whichever mobile device you enjoy, or if you're on both, you're one of those double fisters, right? You just got phone in each hand. Go ahead and hit those buttons, and it'll help the game to have a successful launch. We'd appreciate that. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.